Drive-by shootings are an all-too-common criminal offense that take place in America, supplemented by the fact that in 2021, over 20,000 mortalities were caused by firearms. This kind of senseless act of violence would easily bring a sense of tragedy to the families of the perpetrator, the victims, and also any affected community thereof. But what if the family of the victim wasn't American and the family of the victim didn't even reside in America to begin with? Today we're going to the city of Duncan, Oklahoma to tell one such story. This case holds a place near and dear to my heart because when I first heard about it, I was entirely struck with grief and I was extremely sorry to the victim and his family. I grew up in the city of Lawton, about 1 hour's drive away from the setting of today's travesty. Welcome back to Dark Narratives. On this channel, we cover a lot of true crime and generally dark topics based on all records available to us. If this is something that piques your interest, consider liking this video and subscribing. Without further delay, let us begin with the story of the lives ruined by Chancey Luna, Michael Jones, and James Edwards Jr. Let us begin in Melbourne, Australia. There is a young boy. His name is Chris Lane, and from the time he is able to take his first steps, he falls in love with sports and physical recreation. Family video of the boy in the 90s playing baseball at the local sports field exists and is a long caressed souvenir of his mother and father. Family and friends of his growing up would state that he was very competitive, working his tail off to make himself a better and better player, and he eventually became a team leader for any team that he had joined throughout his youth. At the age of 17 in Australia, he was scouted by Redlands College, a university that is a 40-minute drive from Oklahoma City, and he received a scholarship to play baseball in the small and humble city of Ada, Oklahoma. Life was on the up and up for Chris since arriving in America. He studied hard, played baseball very well, and eventually met a nice young woman by the name of Sarah Harper, an athlete at Redlands College on a golf scholarship. She was a native of Duncan, Oklahoma, who would drive frequently to El Reno for her classes at Redlands College. Chris frequently would take the opportunity to visit Sarah whenever and wherever he could. By all means, if the perfect couple could be manifested on Earth, it would be Chris and Sarah. In June of 2013, they both had planned and took a vacation back to Melbourne, Australia for Sarah to meet the rest of the Lane family, and later they returned to Oklahoma that summer to resume their university courses. Chris and Sarah resumed life as usual as the athletic university students that they were, getting back into the swing of life. From personal experience, I can tell you that traveling from that side of the planet to Oklahoma would take a grand total of at least 27 hours of time in airplanes and a lot of jet lag to deal with at the end of that trip. Chris was also absolutely obsessed with maintaining his athletic physique, and when he worked out, he liked to sweat. He wanted to go out for a jog between his classes in the afternoon of August 16th, 2023. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he prepared to go out for a jog, but unfortunately, he would not be coming home. An eyewitness in a car stopped nearby to call an ambulance. Another witness who lived nearby the scene tried to comfort Chris and keep him alive while the ambulance was on its way. CPR was being administered, but when paramedics arrived on the scene, there was nothing they could do to resuscitate Chris. He was pronounced dead on arrival at Duncan Regional Hospital. The bullet that struck him went through his back, entered one of his lungs, fractured a rib, and ricocheted in a way that entered and exited his heart, entered his other lung, and ultimately stopped in his torso. There was no exit wound. Sarah was between her work shift at a golf sports club and playing a few games of golf herself when she received the bad news. Sarah's mother called Peter Lane, the father of Chris, to inform him of the bad news, and the only thing that could be said on Peter's behalf is that his world stopped right then and there. Chris's mother, his 3 sisters, and the rest of the family were also informed of the bad news, and to say that they were all grief-stricken and heartbroken by this loss is a severe understatement. 3 boys were arrested later this day for what apparently was an entirely unrelated incident, but their car was a 100% identical match to the vehicle that drove by Chris Lane. 2 weeks later, Sarah Harper took Chris back to Australia to be buried in his home country. In the words of Chris's father, the most difficult thing to accept about the loss of his son is the lack of logic and reason and prior motive by the perpetrators who committed the crime. The 3 boys who were arrested were Chancey Luna, Michael Jones, and James Edwards, aged 16, 17, and 15 respectively. The reason for their arrest was that Chancey Luna got into an argument with someone he knew on the phone that he also wanted to shoot, after he had already shot Chris. This person then dared Chancey Luna to show up in the parking lot of a church in Duncan, but then immediately phoned the authorities, informing them that the 3 boys were waiting for him to show up in the parking lot of that church. This person also informed the authorities that they had firearms. The police went to the church and found the boys, but also more importantly, they found the vehicle that they were looking for that sped away immediately after Chris was shot. During interrogations, both James Edwards Jr. and Michael Jones turned against Chancey Luna. They both stated that the murder weapon, which has never been recovered, was in the hands of Chancey Luna and that he was the one who pulled the trigger on Chris Lane. James Francis Edwards Jr. pled guilty to the charge of accessory to murder. This crime has a sentence varying from 5 to 45 years in prison in the state of Oklahoma. He was neither the gunman nor the driver in the vehicle when the drive-by took place. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with a 10-year suspended sentence and is presently on probation, likely due to his age at the time of the crime taking place. His present whereabouts are unknown to the general public but are known to the Oklahoma justice system and its authorities. Michael Jones was the driver of the vehicle during the drive-by. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and, in 2015, was sentenced to life in prison. He will be eligible for parole 36 years after the day when he was sentenced in 2015, meaning he could be out of prison in the year 2051. He was also the one who disposed of the murder weapon used at the scene of the crime. In a televised interview, the father of Michael Jones states that once or twice each month he goes to the roadside memorial of Chris Lane and says a prayer for the Lane family, and that he wished he had gotten an opportunity to meet him. He's also stated that if giving up the life of his own son would bring back Chris, he would gladly do it. Chancey Luna, age 16 at the time of the drive-by, was the gunman. It's unclear if he was ever offered a plea bargain. He was found guilty of first-degree murder in 2015 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 2018, appeals were made to the court to reduce his sentence, but in 2023, his initial conviction of life without the possibility of parole was upheld. The mother of Chancey Luna at the time her son was found guilty was in a state of remorseful denial. She stated openly that she felt there was no way her son would be capable of committing such a crime. After the trial had concluded, she sent a text message to Australian journalists visiting Duncan, Oklahoma for the trial to apologize to the Lane family on her behalf. At the time this crime took place, all three of the boys were minors. In the state of Oklahoma, prosecutors are not allowed to seek capital punishment charges against minors if they are minors at the time that they commit the crime. Perhaps the most shocking detail was that at the time, the main headlines were that the boys committed their crime against Chris because during interrogations with Michael Jones, he stated that they were bored. In summary, the shooting of Chris Lane was a loss of life that was completely random, conducted by juveniles that needed better support groups than just gangs, illicit substances, and proliferation of loosely controlled firearms. If you know anyone who fits this description and you think you may be able to steer them to living a more clear life, show them this video or try to guide them to seek more professional help in their lives. Going down that path is not something they want to do. Years after the loss of Chris Lane, Michael Jones gave an interview from prison to Australian media, in it stating that he is sorry for everything that happened that day. Peter Lane stated the boy was trying to save his own skin and turned against Chancey and James to get himself a lesser or reduced sentence. Even to this day, there is a massive void in the Lane family. A new baseball field has been put under construction in memory of Chris Lane. It's a little league field in the northwest of Melbourne, Australia. Work began to start the Chris Lane Memorial Field in October of 2022. It is slowly but surely beginning to take shape, but the exact date for when construction will be finished is not known, but is expected to be in 2023. It will be Australia's one and only Memorial Little League baseball field. At the end of the day, the death of Chris Lane could have been entirely avoided with more stable family support structures for all three of the boys involved, if they had clear and well-thought life aspirations that would have taken them far away from what they were already doing, or if a friend had simply asked them if they wanted to do something else that day. If you or someone that you know may be in a dark place or headed down the wrong path, especially if they are young, try to inspire them not to go down that path. Easily a dozen lives were ruined in a senselessly random act of violence. In the comments below, please tell us if you've heard of any stories like today's, a foreigner in your state, town, or country who didn't deserve to die, but did due to a senseless act of violence. My own thoughts are that if something happened just slightly differently on this day, then all of this could have been avoided. Until next time, remember that every day is a new opportunity to see the light. Goodbye.